Morning, everybody. So I get the great privilege this morning of being able to not really focus on any one particular topic, but talk about one of my favorite topics, which is change. And the change is happening around us, as you saw in that video. What does digital disruption mean? What is it doing to our organizations? And in that, what do we need to be paying attention to? So what are the weak signals of things that are coming through for our future? Now I like that video we put together around the fourth industrial revolution, because the one question it asks, as we acknowledge, what I find really interesting is that despite the creation of the internet and all the things that have happened over the last, call it 20 years, it was still not significant enough to the state we're in today to have caused what they've called their fourth industrial revolution. Why was the internet not an industrial revolution? And you look at the types of businesses that created, the types of opportunities that created. You go back to the third, and he made a point in the video, $75 trillion of value to date since the creation of the microchip. And that we're now at this new phase, and what it says is if you look at the way we used to be and the way we're going forward, what's coming next and what's happening? And that's really what we want to ultimately explore today. So the idea around this fourth industrial revolution, just to make sure everyone's kind of clear around what it is, the concepts of steam created rail, electricity created factories, production. The computing generations of the 1960s bore out some of the biggest companies we have today, and generally all of us in the room were born out of what came largely of things that existed in the third industrial revolution. And the question becomes, what are we doing in the fourth? And what's happening as we move to this era where we move away from competing on computing to the idea of competing on intelligence. What we see also is our exponential growth of adoption. So if you look at everyone's favorite topic at the moment, my wife's in particular, Corona, the scale of adoption, the speed at which things are spreading. And my favorite example rather is actually the plastic straw. So if you think about it, from when the plastic straw suddenly became unpopular to the time that it was replaced in every global or any retail store, any shop, any restaurant with paper straws, I would argue in less than 3 months, the world had fundamentally turned its back, had made a decision, fundamentally turned its back on single-use straws, and had moved to either the metal straws, which are the cool and trendy use, or the paper straws, which we all let disintegrate into our drink. But what changed over there was the speed at which that happened. So can you imagine having a plastic straw manufacturing business for the last 50 years, thinking your demand curve's very happy and all you go. And in 2 months, you have a product that is now fundamentally unpopular and no one will ever buy again. Or you have your little paper business and you make little straws and some people buy it and some don't. And suddenly you have the exponential growth that comes with replacing that. That kind of adoption and change as we move forward is becoming faster and becoming more evident. And we see it changing in a number of ways. And this fourth industrial revolution is interesting for me because, and we base a lot of our theme around how we see our clients' businesses transforming exactly on this point, because it's about, we know our expectations are shifting. The way we want to work, the now generation, which is led by the millennials and Generation Zs, instantaneously, once you see something, we want something. We don't want to wait. And we will go to many lengths to avoid waiting because it's this instant gratification ideology we have. I got an iPhone 11. When that came out, my contract was just ready to renew at that point in time. And nothing was going to stop me. It was an all-consuming addiction over the weekend to get from my old phone to the 11. And whatever store had it, I had to go to Edenvale, and I live in Midrand, to get it. But where not normally you'd make that kind of a trip, but it was that committed to now I wanted the change. And that's how and fine, maybe I'm a millennial, that's the problem. But therein lies the way we're changing and the way that our mindsets are shifting about it. Our assets are also becoming productive engines, and in that, not only they are already productive engines, but what we're seeing is that it's being enhanced by data. We can optimize our supply chain. We talked to a lot of you about predictive and preventative maintenance, but there's going to become a time, and we've already seen this with autonomous cars, where the technology is going to improve itself. It's going to do its own updates. It's going to call for its own parts. It's going to make its own bookings when it needs a service, rather than needing maintenance managers to walk around with notification boards and write down whether or not something looks like it's about to fail or not. The collaboration innovation, talking to a customer earlier as well, and the biggest excitement is, one of the biggest excitements is the potential to back integrate into the logistics business and be able to build a connected supply chain, which is something we're doing with other customers as well, is exciting because it's the collaboration. And it's no longer, it's being able to do it in a way that I don't give up all my information. I can connect on the data points that make sense to my business. And I can now collaborate far more easily between all parts of my supply chain or my organization. And as we know, the digital models that are coming out, the new revenue streams, the new sources, the new opportunities that we get really become very exciting. So when we talk about digital disruption, it's this kind of concept over here, and I think about it because we've been reading about it for a while, was that probably 5 years ago, all of the articles and like Harvard Review stuff was all about Facebook and Instagram and really tech product businesses that were not really relatable to even me running a consulting business because it just seemed a bit too ethereal and it was a bit too far out, etc. But what's come crashing down for all of us, and if we take banking as an example, the realities of change are happening, is that we have to start to embrace it. Businesses can no longer afford to not understand how technology is going to disrupt and change their business, and also not understand how that's going to, they need to evolve in order to leverage that. So if you look at Moore's Law, so this is a graph of computing power, and you know the whole idea of Moore's Law is that it doubles every time. What research is saying is about at the pace we're going, so because you're able to get such a consistent trend line, you can predict it further on. And predicting it further on says that the processing power by 2029 will reach the same state that we have from a brain power perspective. So by 2029, if the technology continues to go on like that, it will be able to compute at the same power as what our brain can do. But what's the next move? What's therefore twice the brain power? Because remember, it's doubling every time. That's what Moore's Law spoke about. The number of transistors in a dense circuit doubles every 2 years. So 2 years later, it's twice as powerful as the brain. 2 years later, it's 4 times as powerful at that point. No, then 6 times. But what we have is this idea, and what's important to think about in your business is Hemingway's Law of Motion, this idea of gradually then suddenly. And what we're battling with is the concepts of exponential growth and exponential change. So when you look at this, I'll talk through a couple of laws which I find really interesting at the moment, is your rate of change. So this law plots, if you look at productivity and you look at the momentum shift we're seeing, so through thousands of years, up until the creation of that agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, you just look at the scale and that exponential growth because we're getting into multiples of power, which is different. Okay? It's about extending it around the concepts of exponential growth that technology is bringing. It is scaling faster, and we're no longer constrained. When every constraint we come across, we generally seem to be finding ways to resolve and get around. This was a new quote we're putting on the wall outside at the office, is our inability to understand the exponential function and understand exponential change is one of the biggest issues, is that idea of gradually then suddenly. And look at industries that have not paid attention for a long time and have scaling and changing exponentially. So I'll give you a good example that it's not, we see in our UK customers, but in that market, one of the biggest problems conventional asset managers have in the UK market is that they have hardly no millennial and virtually zero Generation Z customers inside of their business. So think of a UBS or something. If you wanted to have a share portfolio, you'd have to open a broker account, send them your FICA documents, etc. Trade, they settle a day later. You can't do it instantaneously. All the platforms that are advertised on the train, there's zero fees, zero brokerage fees. It's an app you download, you scan your ID document, you provide it, and you can trade. And you can buy Apple shares today, which can you imagine? I don't even know how to buy an Apple share. I'd have to phone the bank, I'd have to get an account, they'd have to get SARS validation for it, etc. All these different problems. You could trade in Apple shares in 15 minutes. So it's exponentially changing that whole broker-based model that they used to have because the technology is different. And the technologists are giving it away because they want the customer base. They see the potential of the customer base to on-sell all of the next sets of opportunities, which is what we're seeing. On-sell them insurance, then you give them a credit card. So the big banks, there's a particular credit card in London, it's a bank that's credit card is Luma Orange. You just look when you're tapping, the number of people that have that credit card, because it's a brand new digital bank, it has no branch network, it has no need to go into a branch, it's got an app, you get a funky credit card, and that's the proposition the guys want. They just want a license to transact. They don't care about all the other peripheral value adds that the bank can add. They just want to be able to pay and change. And that's exciting, and that's different. So what we see that this is happening, and the biggest concept, that's the biggest change you've got to think about, is this idea that compute becomes abundant. Now, what that means over there is that it becomes so cheap, the cost to compute becomes so cheap that it becomes, you start to pay for use, you start to pay for your technology, everything starts to have computing power. So your electric toothbrush could have a computing chip inside of it. A paintbrush can have a chip. A wall can have a chip, etc., like that. Because it doesn't matter. Its cost becomes so low that everything that has electricity is able to become smart and can become interactive and can share information. And that's very different. Why? But it's because we've hit a point where compute suddenly becomes abundant. And the next graph, I think, is really interesting. So this is looking at lithium-ion batteries. So if you look at the cost, because if you look, even take solar for us in South Africa, I'll talk about power and where this is going for power, but the cost of lithium-ion per kilowatt hour in 1995, okay, versus where it got down to there, versus the impact that the Tesla Model X made. So by it becoming a big driver, because I don't know if you ever followed electric cars or that. Remember there was hydrogen? And everyone was launching a hydrogen car, and I don't know where that went. But what happened was the power side overtook it, electric vehicles took over. But what we're seeing is since that, the consistent cost down. So what do we see? Because what happens is as everybody started to dive in, as they dive in deeper, more people manufacture, more people get involved, more people research, and we once again get the exponential function where then suddenly your cost drives down. So they're speaking about a world in the future, once they solve the storage problem, where electricity will be like data. So here's a good example of this. Look at our cost of data for fixed line. So you no longer, if your mobile, I know is a different story, but your fixed line at home, most people, you'd have a 10 meg or a 20 meg line uncapped. You no longer care. Like compute is abundant, data is abundant. I don't care how much I consume. I'm only paying for capacity. So they're saying there's a point in time when we can store it, which would be fantastic given this morning's performance we all went through, where electricity becomes abundant, meaning that you pay for use. You just pay for a fee to run it. And you have unlimited electricity. So the constraint becomes we can't store it particularly well at the moment. The cost of storage is still too high. But like anything, that's what we're seeing will start to drive down. So you see a future where electricity becomes abundant. And you see a future where you pay to use do you pay for the capability of electricity? You don't pay to use the electricity. And that's already what we've got on our data as well. And the cloud also becomes a function. It's a big differentiator because the cloud made compute abundant and made it scalable, meaning that I could linearly scale up based on my use. And that was also a change to industry because I no longer needed the big infrastructure of the big guys in order to be an incumbent. So we can play this out. So if you look at e-commerce retail sales, the point of this is when we're starting to use the maths to understand it, when you see a graph like that, you can largely predict the likely outcome of what your next 10 years is going to look like. So if you're a retailer, and this is the US, so South Africa's I think at about 2%, so our graph is trailed down. But if you look at how that changes, if you look at what's happening in other markets around e-commerce or around in retail trade, we can start to predict where it's going to go. So if you're a retailer who doesn't have a program of work on the go around how e-commerce is going to change, because what happens is one of the issues to it in Africa is the cost of data. But data is becoming abundant at fiber. When they go to 5G and that already Vodacom put its prices down 30% yesterday, we're going to hit a point where once again also data is not going to become that expensive. So suddenly that expands the whole network. So yes, we have the issue with take a look at Takealot's drop-off site across the highway. You can't necessarily deliver small orders, but then you have the integrated drop-off points. And you create a supply chain where someone else can move it. We take a bulk to a place, that place splits it, etc., like that. That's how you can solve it for Africa as an example, but we can kind of start to place reliance on it. And we see how it changes, because this also looks for us at time spent with digital media. And if you look at how, and I remember it was something I read about Zuckerberg, I think around 2010, 2011, he said that they were building for the computer first, and the mobile app used to be quite annoying, and you sometimes there were other apps around. It wasn't a very good app to start. And he made the fundamental shift to say that we're mobile first and browser second. And in doing that, their focus shifted to, because they believed that mobile consumption was going to be the way of the future. And if you look at how much media we consume, how much are you consuming on your laptop versus how much are you consuming on your mobile? And that shift. So we've not only increased, it's been able to capture a greater share of our attention. By changing the medium, making it more accessible, making it faster and easier, we've rapidly expanded this out. And even if you look at the idea, Richard and I were talking about right now, because I've got a tablet and he's got a phone that's got a big screen with a Samsung on with a pen. It's also the phone has almost disintermediated the tablet largely, because as the phones become bigger and easier to write on and work on, why do you need the tablet? The screen is bright, the screen is big, you can consume large volumes of information on it. So how are they solving it? Well, they're letting you fold it now so that you can open it up and get an even bigger screen surface when you need it. So we see the technology is changing. And what's changing is this idea also around, this is something by Clay Christensen, who was a Harvard professor, around what we see that why we have to be careful of disruption is this idea around the incumbent. If you look in your industry, if some of you are the incumbent in your industry, some of you are fighting against the incumbent. And the problem that you have is that often competitive advantage was defined by the incumbent's position. So think branch network, think integrated supply chain, etc., owning the whole supply chain, owning the store infrastructure inside of all the retail chains, all the malls in the country as an example. But what we're seeing is that all that has to happen is a new entrant has to be able to redefine what is good enough for the customer's needs. So my banking, that credit card UK example is, the customer said, we have a credit card, we can get you online in 30 minutes and deliver a credit card in a day, but we don't have a branch network. And the customer can say, I don't need a branch network, that's fine. All I need is to transact in the morning. So by redefining when, this is the danger of disruption, what the customer need is, the customer defines what is incumbent. And the customer will define and move away from incumbent organizations because new entrants can offer a different proposition, a better proposition. So like a really interesting example in the airline industry was Virgin, a lot of Virgin or Branson stuff was built around coming in to disrupt the industry that was very badly served by a customer. So he went after BA first and he went after Qantas. And when he went after it, he defined, because BA was the big incumbent, it set the price, it set the agenda, it made flying unaffordable for many people because of all the extra issues. So even take in our market what Kalula and etc. did. The incumbent came in and said, do you want to pay? Sorry, they came in as a new entrant and said, well, if I made the ticket cheaper, but I didn't give you free food and drink, we didn't give you a business class, okay, but we could get you there because if your job to be done is to get to A to B in the cheapest price, reliably and safely, and I can deliver that for you, is that good enough? And the customers said absolutely yes. Same as FastJet in Europe also as well. Where the incumbent wanted business class and free food online, and the irony is I flew Qantas the other day inside Australia, and even on the Qantas flight, I almost got myself in trouble ordering things. You have to pay. So you're flying Qantas, you're paying the premium, and you still have to buy your drinks. So they're trying to meddle the model, and they've got other, like Virgin Australia and other different smaller brands that do things, that move around the country, that service a better customer need. So let's talk about South African airlines. We've got no airlines in the room, so we can be safe. Who goes to Cape Town a lot? Okay? If you go to Cape Town from here, what's the biggest problem? Is it that it's not, the 6 o'clock flight is one issue. That 5:30 home doesn't come home at 5:30. Okay? We know that. So, but take a look at one airline. Let's take Safair. So who then who's shifted more of their business towards Safair? Because if you're on a tight deadline, why do you do it? The customer need is, I need to get from A to B in the fastest space of time. There were incumbents. All of our traditional incumbents, the green ones, the orange ones, etc. They said there's a customer need who wants to focus on being on time and getting home or leaving on time. Okay, when I land at 8 o'clock, my first meeting is at 9 o'clock. It is a rapid exercise to get off that thing, get to the car, and get the hell out of Dodge. Now, what have they done? They've focused on a particular customer metric. And they've made sure that there's a customer that needs to be on time and values that. And they were able to create a space where you would normally think there's no ways in South Africa there's a need for more routes. But there is, because they solve for a different customer need. And now even if I look at some of our guys, we're doing way more business over there with them now because we can place a reliance on it. It serves my customer need, which is the ability to arrive on time, get out of that airport quickly, and also leave on time and get home. So if you look at a couple of disruptions over here, so if you look, we know social influencers. Whose children want to be social influencers? Okay, because that's a new popular trend that we see as well. So if you look at this, so this is a particular fashion blogger, and what we see is that she's got her and the boyfriend, etc., like that. She's a social influencer. Look at that. She's busy. That's a Samsung Galaxy. She's a paid partnership with Galaxy, so she's making money. My wife watches that British dancing show. The Britain's got not talent, Strictly Come Dancing. And one of the girls here, I don't know what she does, but she's got many followers. And one of the people that was on the show, and her claim to fame is she's an Instagram influencer. So she gets paid to bugger around all day long, and like this, and go to parties and have a phone. And you look at this, and then we get very involved in her social life. She's had a conscious uncoupling. They're no longer together. All right? Okay? So tell me, does anyone notice anything about her? She's not real. She's computer generated. She's got 1.9 million followers. She does not exist. She is an AI and a fashion brand that has been put out. She's a social media influencer. She doesn't exist. Okay? People, she's got how many posts? She's got a boyfriend. Oh, sorry, wait, hang on, go back. She's got a boyfriend. She's got she's getting money from Samsung. She's got a life. She's got a persona. People like it over there. 65,000 likes of her fake uncoupling. But that's how the world is shifting. Look at that. So what changes? This is a weak signal for what? So suddenly, if you want to be a model, problem. But think of eventing, even things like today. All of your fashion shows can become digital. You can design the perfect model for your clothes. What else happens is that security changes because you don't need to have these big events. The eventing venues that would rely on these big fashion brands, et cetera, like this, no longer exists because you can do it all digitally. So they canceled the Milan Fashion Show for obvious reasons recently. But if it was a digital event and all of the models that were representing the clothes were moving around, what then? Because then you got to look at film. So then do you need actors in the future? Do you need studios? Do you need cameras? What are these all weak signals for ultimately? And that's really interesting. And the issue, and Lionel's going to have to close his eyes and his ears for the next slide. But if we go and have a look at this, let's talk about disruption. Let's talk about understanding disruption. Because we were all, everybody had this. When I was picking this, most people had that guy, I'm assuming. Okay, the world-famous phone. And then Jobs came with this, which was his disruption point of his business. So what they asked was a question that everybody was asking. So Steve Ballmer, you'll see in the background who he works for. But
$500 fully subsidized with a plan? I said, that is the most expensive phone in the world, and it doesn't appeal to business customers because it doesn't have a keyboard, which makes it not a very good email machine. Now, it may sell very well or not. We have our strategy. We've got great Windows mobile devices in the market today. You can get a Motorola Q phone now for $99. It's a very capable machine. It'll do music. It'll do internet. It'll do email. It'll do instant messaging. So I kind of look at that and I say, well, I like our strategy. I like it a lot.
Famous last words in mobile, shall we say. But the point was the disruption was he wasn't trying to build a better one of these. He wasn't trying to solve for it. So he wasn't constrained by the idea. Everyone was trying to build this better version of this thing. Remember, they were all kind of similar. There was the flip versions of it with the keyboard. But the disruption he created, and the disruption is never one thing. The disruption is often a number of different factors. So part of the disruption was the way you bought it. Was that this was bought through anyone on normal contracts, and there was no brand associated with it. So the retail experience, we've all been into the Apple stores, and they draw you to them because it's the experience of the brand. What these guys were also better than everybody else at, they were good at building computers. The others weren't building computers. So they've been building computers their whole life. They were trying to understand how to package more computing power into the device, not how to find a better way to handle the keyboard. So they created the disruption, and everybody at that time said probably similar things. He wasn't alone. Because the point of this was that this was the incumbent position. Nobody understood the different need, and nobody was asking the question. And that's the worry we have today, because things can come up inside of your world that if you dismiss it, there's a lot. I mean, even the guy that ran BBM, I've definitely heard a comment where he spoke about WhatsApp Messenger, and he said, WhatsApp, I like our odds. Everyone's got it, it's connected, it's safe, nobody cares. And same as Blockbuster, almost bought Netflix for like $20 million. Wasn't a relevant business, et cetera, like that. Didn't see the point of the disruption of what they were trying to achieve. And these are often famous last words. So if you think of disruption also as together, think of Kodak, which actually created digital print as well, digital film. So digital film, it wasn't just the medium that changed, but what else changed with digital film? Because remember, it's not one thing. It's often a connection of things. So what changed was suddenly accessibility. The concepts of printing, I didn't have to go through that particular process. The biggest thing that changed, though, also storage. I no longer had to have, like my grandmother, all the albums under the TV, as an example, because I could store them differently. And what else did that get? Similar to what Facebook created, ultimately, was the connectivity, the distribution. I could now share a photo with someone that was far away. So it wasn't just the medium shifting. It was what that medium enabled. It enabled me to share a photo with my grandmother now, instantaneously. It enabled me to take lots of memories. I mean, I don't know how you do it now. I've got 2 small kids. you very rarely any moment, because you can never get the two to look at you at the same time. So you take like 10 photos and look for the best one, and even then you use the live thing to move it an edge or two because the one looks away in the middle of the photo. I don't know how you did it when you had 27 shots on a film. You had to be bloody sure, because now we take 10 photos. Why? Because it's abundant. The storage has become abundant once again. So it changes, and immediately we share it, we store it. So you got like Google Photos, which is giving you free storage for any volume if they can manage the size compression, because storage is abundant now. So I don't actually care anymore. And if I run out of memory on my phone, no biggie, I just back it up and clear out space on my phone. Or just get the bigger 256 gig. I didn't want to wait the extra 2 days, so I got the smaller one because of that problem. But it's the same as well even on the faster car idea. That whole Henry Ford said what did they want would be a faster car. Most people say, a faster horse. Sorry, not a faster car. Was they were thinking about the world in the world of the horse. So probably what they wanted was a horse that didn't get tired at the end of the day, didn't mess all over the road and crap on the road. Okay, that's what they would have probably wanted, a horse that could carry a bigger carriage. They never understood, no one would have come up and said they wanted to sit and have an engine and gears and petrol and all of those different things. That's really a big change. So disruption to us is everywhere. It's exciting, the change process of it. And I'll use a last example, I think it's the last example. When I tried to do this presentation, I got that photo from Amazon's website, meaning that Amazon is now selling second-hand cars in the US. So think of the US consumer, the British. You've got an Amazon account. They've got the brand equity. You trust them. You no longer need to go down to the corner dealership because you know what the brand promise is. They've got the comparison. So what changes? Suddenly second-hand car dealerships are under pressure. So if we look at it, we'll think of this idea. Let's play this out. So let's use that as a proxy for autonomous vehicles in the future. Okay, vehicles we don't need to drive, we don't need to own, etc., and all of that. So what changes? So we have a behavior change because I don't have to drive the car anymore. The biggest issue, the biggest opportunity is I don't have to pay that much attention anymore. My morning commute is suddenly an extra hour's sleep. It's either an opportunity to work, but I don't have to be involved or connected to that. So what gets impacted? The first one is what happens to energy drinks. So think of truck drivers or people that drive long hours that rely on energy drinks to keep themselves awake and interested. Do you still have the same size market? Because people use energy drinks unless they like the taste, they use it to stay awake. The biggest consumer apparently in North America of energy drinks is long-haul truck drivers. So if they're no longer driving like that, does that cancel all that demand? The next issue is media consumption goes up. Why? Because we've got more free time. So what do we can be reliably certain the more free time we have, the more we bug around on our phone. It's great for Netflix. It's great for that. And data becomes more abundant. It becomes even easier to do. Second-hand car ownership, just off of that alone. If you're a car dealership, the problem with the dealership, because remember, Amazon's a marketplace. It doesn't have to buy the car. It just has to give you the ability to connect the buyer to a seller. Whereas a car dealership has to have all the capital and has to have the floor plan made up so that they can put the car on the floor, which you're never going to buy. You go through some small towns and you look at the cars and who the hell is going to buy some of these cars at those prices with that kind of high mileage? But they've had to lash some cash somewhere to buy that kind of stock. So stock changes. What happens to second-hand cars? You'd assume we'd have less accidents because the vehicles are now aware of each other and connected and therefore they won't knock into each other is the hope or the theory of it. So what changes there? Car repair shops, second-hand car parts. How does that impact you? Because now repairs related to damage are avoided all of a sudden. We don't have that same problem. Fatalities reduce, less people dying on the road. Okay? Insurance, well, how does insurance change? Because there's less accidents. So all of them, insurance should theoretically come down because our risk has all gone down because all the cars are working together in an organized but chaotic environment. One of the issues with fatalities, apparently, is organs are a problem. That's a weak signal. What is autonomous cars a weak signal for? It's a weak signal for the problem with organs because a lot of organs come out of accidents. So any form of that, so any of that organ transplant issue that they speak about on the radio, all of that, if you don't have car accidents, you don't have organs. It's one of the biggest sources of organs because not all of us are organ donors or are happily willing to do that, which is quite scary. So then do you suddenly get a black market for organs all of a sudden? Because you can't find organs for critical operations. So in different parts of the world, you could, think of the, what's a Taken movie where they were stealing girls for that trade. Now you suddenly have Taken, but they want you to harvest your organs. That's a freaky story, so let's move away. But You're playing it out to kind of an extremes of where it could go, and then you've got to work out kind of where do we land in the middle of it. Other one is traffic flow. So what do we do as well? Speed limits can increase because there's less problems, because the cars can predict how to behave, so we can go faster. So all of a sudden, what changes is that faster, shorter haul. I don't need the car train anymore because my car can now do it just as quick. There's less accidents. It's a little bit easier. But think of the other issue. What happens to airlines? Short-haul airlines. So if you could do 200 km an hour to Bloem, and it took you 2 hours to get to Bloemfontein as an example, whereas it takes you 15 minutes to fly, an hour before, all the faff, etc., would you make that trip? And it's a very expensive ticket. So instead of spending $2,000 per route to go to Bloemfontein as that kind of proxy, you would drive there to cost you less money, and your time difference is not that big. So suddenly short-haul flying is a disrupted industry. What happens? And this is kind of one of the important laws here, is that we all think this is called the Gartner Magic Quadrant. The Gartner Hype Cycle. It's not. It's tomorrow's law. Which is we tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long run. So if you look at the long-run impact of those things in 5, 10 years' time, we did an exercise like this also about connected fridges. So if your fridge was connected, which is it is currently, can be connected, and your fridge was ordering for you, you could set that I like a Banting diet. You could set that these kind of products must come in. I want to keep my calorie count below this. The fridge could predict what to buy you. So what changes there? Suddenly your healthcare changes, your insurance changes, your buying patterns changes, all of your discretionary spend changes because you're not walking past discretionary shops, because everything's being delivered to you. So you're cutting out all the other shops as well. So it's an interesting idea that you've got around this process. So when we talk about technology and technology adoption, this kind of idea we've got over there is that in the shifting world, it's not only about looking at the big trend and seeing what it is. It's about understanding what is the future trend as well. What is the changing trend that's going to happen? And what is it a weak signal for? So that Limkita is a weak signal to a fundamental change in the way that we do fashion. That events are going to happen. If you're in eventing or security, the biggest issue with autonomous cars actually is property. The biggest industry to be disrupted will be property, because you no longer need space to park. You no longer need space. You have to own a place. And like South Africa may be slightly different, but if you think of big central cities like London or New York, parking's a big, big problem. It's an enormously expensive exercise to drive into London, and it's very difficult to find yourself a parking. So those industries suddenly change and suddenly get disrupted as well. So we've got to understand it. So if we bring it back to business, now the problem, the unenviable problem we all have, and these are just some of the words, there's probably 100 other words you could come up with, was all of the issues we have to face as an organization around how do we drive change, the complexity we face inside of our organization. Technology, people, change. The other problem is this, is that for the first time, I think there's 4 generations in the same workforce. Because you've got Zs, you've got millennials, you've got the ones before baby boomers, and then baby boomers. So you can have a ranging across that. And as we know, all 4 are radically different. So there's Greta and all the problems that come with her. Everybody's focused the last 10 years on trying to figure these guys out. All right? And now what's happened is these guys are a bigger problem, the new worker, because they're very different. They've got different ideologies. Another exec of a competitor I know said that for the first time recently, he got interviewed. So he was running an interview, and at the end of the interview, he was ready to finish. The person had a half-an-hour interrogation of him. What's their green policy? What are they doing in the world? How are they donating? Their CSI. 10 years ago, you'd have got frog marched out the room and kicked out and told to get stuffed. He had to sit there very diligently, sit and make sure he answered all the right questions. Because he said, and it changed, because it was someone from this part of the world. They have got a different set of values, a different set of things that bother them. And at the technology level, we've got not only just the people-centric technologies we worry about automation, experience, augmentation, but the spaces side. The power, compute becomes abundant. I don't have to always centralize it. I can process on the time. So at the spot. So there's a Logitech camera that we saw that does facial recognition inside your house. So it would ping an alarm if someone different than who it was planning to come in came in. It doesn't need to be connected, because the AI algorithm is sitting on the device. It's got the 4 or 5 faces that it needs to have on the Logitech camera. All right? So anything different than that, it raises the flag and it connects and sends off the alarm. It doesn't have to send the image, go do the processing in the cloud and then bring it back down. It can compute on the edge. Compute's becoming abundant. So if you think about your own business and what we'll go through for the rest of the day, it's about this understanding between your business optimization and your business's transformation that you're trying to make. So at an optimization level, when you think about it, when we're talking about digital disruption, we're talking about things that change and improve the business, that add value without changing the business. So we want to be better. This is where most of it's going. We want to be better at these things. Better at revenue improvement, better with our workforce, better at experience, better at using assets, versus we want to transform our business. We want to change the way we work. We want to create new products, new mediums, new opportunities, drive loyalty, etc. All of those different things. We want to change our organization. And it's the hybrid between where you are and in terms of your journey. Most people are still looking to just get better and become digital at what they do. That's probably the biggest use case at the moment. But slowly but surely, you're starting to see these use cases creep in about the business transformation idea that we have. But what the problem we've got to get is that digital outcomes must speak to, and this is often where it goes a little bit wrong, is we go and chase digital projects or initiatives without a really real business case associated with it. So there's not real business value. It's not driving it. It's often technology for technology's sake. So making sure that your outcomes that are what the strategy is trying to achieve work together. So clients talk about data outcomes. They want to focus on data outcomes. And that's a problematic one because often we spend too much time trying to create data because we have it and we feel like we should use it. We spent all this money getting this stuff. Let's just get it into a report or use it, and we don't know why to use it, and we don't know how it works. That drives your value down. The idea of your user, so the other thing is that historically technology transformation projects have been about technology transformation, very little about user. And yes, we have a train the trainer program, and you go in a course, and you spend 3 days, and you get told by someone, and you're on your phone, and it's not paying attention, and you miss half of it, or on Facebook, whatever the case is. The problem that they have is that too many system implementations don't care about these two, or all 4 of these, sorry, but how am I going to get the system adopted? How am I going to make sure my user is competent and literate? This is the biggest reason guys say, oh, we can't change. Our guys won't get it. They don't understand it. They don't know how to understand it. Yeah, of course they don't. Okay, but Steve Ballmer didn't understand what the iPhone was trying to do. So you have to educate them on it. You have to be able to take them on the journey, understand how they experience it, how to give them a better experience, and make context as important in terms of making it possible for them to do that. And the idea that technology is changing businesses' mind and workers' minds, the technology adoption, and particularly is not about, it shouldn't be about, and most RPA, and you hopefully hear about it later, almost every RPA project Gartner says that is done under the guise of getting rid of jobs has generally failed. It has got the lowest productivity, lowest output of RPA, which is the jobs replacement idea. The jobs augmentation idea is the most successful version of RPA. So what that is about the augmentation of the way I do my job. So that's the problem they said is too many guys have gone on these big initiatives to cut 50 jobs in finance, and we're going to replace them all with bots. That's not practical. What you can do is you can get a bot, the debtors clerk as an idea, instead of going and checking and reconning every single account, the system could absolutely do that and give them and say, these are the 4 you should worry about today. And let them go focus on dealing with those 4. Okay, on the processing side, instead of reading every invoice to look at which ones are not able to get through and you've got to contact the vendor to get information, the system can do that. Or I can analyze it and give it to the machine at a micro level and get it to scale, let the bot scale it out. Or I do a part, you do a part, or it's just the way we work. It's a connectivity. The system does some of it, we do some of it, etc. It just kind of changes and evolves. And that's really that's when we think of technology as augmenting, there are jobs to go, but that shouldn't be its objective. It's more about how the role needs to change to evolve at the moment. And also the concepts of data. So how we drive data, how we think about it. This becomes very important, and this is one of the biggest problems, is that people talk about data, but they don't really own it particularly well. Executives don't own data. They whinge about it when it doesn't work. They want it to be there, but it's an asset. So if you see it as an asset, so we do EAM, which is Enterprise Asset Management. And that's lots of theory about maintenance and preventative maintenance, predictive maintenance of the asset, the physical side, the plans that you've got, etc., the condition, all that stuff. Why don't you do that about data if we're all saying, oh, data is a big asset? Our customers are our biggest asset. You have to treat them in the same way, meaning you have to give a damn about data. Because you can't do this stuff if you don't have consistency at this level. Because the machine, it kind of can, but it's really hard for it to pull 2 Excel spreadsheets, bring them together, VLOOK them up, and grow and change it. It needs connectivity. So there's a tweet, I couldn't find it, I saw, but they said that how do you know when you're a successful data scientist is when you spent all day renaming 35 CSV files so that you can build a model. Okay, that's the problem. Because of that. So your data is wrong, you're not going to win in that respect. And if even change, so like we said, the change management methodology approach that you've got to focus on is really very important. Because this is the journey. I say this more and more to clients. It's not about the destination. It's a lot more about the journey. So it is about the destination, but the journey is the most important part. Planning the journey out, being on the journey, because to a bit of Tony's point when he started, are any of you going to guarantee that the variables we sit and look at today are going to be exactly the same in a year or two's time, or worse, or 5 years' time? No, that's a dangerous bet in anything. So you have to be flexible. And we see that in the way that we implement, sorry, it's going the wrong way, that we implement. So what you had was that companies spoke about the idea that a transformation was one big thing. A big block of work, we go in and do a mega transformation, we make all the changes, we do what we need to do. These things fail a lot. Okay? Big transformation projects are not particularly successful things in most organizations. Okay? Anyone, am I wrong, or I got a hallelujah? So I think we see that. But what we've seen that's changed in the buying patterns of our customers here and around the world is we are agreeing to a journey towards an end state destination. But what the buying pattern that's working really well, that's risk sensitive, is it's a journey, meaning it's an increment. We move, we're more iterative. So waterfall is not the way of doing it. It's iterative. We evolve. We go from here to there, to there, to there, to there. And we make these changes. You're probably going to pay more, okay, and it may take you slightly longer, but you're going to get the outcome you want, and you're going to be a lot more successful at it. This one, the one big mega purchase order, doesn't go down that well anymore because everyone is too scared. Project fatigue, change fatigue, all the words everyone uses. Nobody likes it, and it's got a bad rep. What has a better rep at the moment is this iterative and agile. This idea that we're on a journey, but we're doing it consistently. We are in the process. I speak to our sales teams also. Like things at ERP and EPM used to be quite big milestone steps in an organization. And that's risky. If you can make it more of a momentum, you can move momentum. Okay? You can change it. You can make it up. You can make it go down. You can move it. So if you're able to make it a function of momentum and progress, it's a much better way to do it than it is to go after it as one big ethereal being and thing. So to summarize from my side, if you look at the principles, if I go through what I've probably roared through, is this idea that we've got that computers becoming abundant. It is changing. Just you see that in your fiber line in the home. We see that in cloud computing. You can get access to hardware you could not do. I remember SAB, one of my first clients, it was 11 years ago, when they ordered 32 gig machines that had 8 cores. They were like 250,000 Rand machines. You can get a MacBook laptop that's got more processing power. And it was a big deal. It was pretty much the biggest box in that data center. And it was a big faff and a big affair to get them to buy it at the time. Is that, you can roll the dices on Azure, is that right? You can just roll the dials, right? You can move it. It's not a problem. So compute's abundant. It's a lot of change. There's a lot of change happening. You've got to be aware of change. You've got to be reactive to it. And it's about exponential technology opportunity. The technology is becoming exponential. It's changing really quickly. And it's changing. We're not isolated from it down here in the bottom of Africa. But we can leverage and learn from what's happening around us to build really interesting businesses. Incumbent position is defined by what the customer defines as good enough. So what you perceive to be your incumbency position in terms of the things you've got, are you really sure that you are unbreakable in that respect? Because others can do differently. Business's impact. So your normal tools around business transformation don't work. You have to think, don't work, have a higher risk than they've ever had before. You need to think about a new approach. Your data is an asset. Apply EAM principles that you would to the yellow equipment in your organization to your data. Manage it, monitor it, measure it, preventatively maintenance, all the things we wish Eskom had done to its plants, do that to your data. Follow the OEM's requirements around keeping your data alive and well. understand our users differently. And users is now, it's an ongoing journey. It's not hand over a user guide, give it to HR, and get the train-the-trainer program. That doesn't work anymore. You've got to engage your users because some are more comfortable with the new world, some are less comfortable. And it's the journey, helping them get on that ultimate journey. And technology is not necessarily there to replace jobs. It's also there to augment jobs and improve your jobs. And I think the last point I want to make is that we used to compete in the world on computing. We're going to be competing in the future on intelligence. So the businesses that are able to compete on intelligence over pure computing power and pure access to market that were incumbents, that's very different. The business that can connect better to their customers, fulfill more efficiently, run their business more optimally, will succeed and will be more robust in the future. And that's all about intelligence. Thank you very much. It's been wonderful to talk to you. And as Tony said, we'll chat afterwards.